Welcome to episode 10 of Teachers Lift. Today we're chatting with Jane Robbins and Christine Burns about the course they've developed at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University on storytelling and personal narratives. Their unique approach to this course offers useful insights for all teachers. Now, let me turn things over to our hosts, Eric and Jessica, who are chatting with Jane and Christine. I hope you enjoy.
Hey. So welcome everybody to this lovely Friday afternoon. Hope you all had a nice Easter weekend. What week are we in this semester, Jessica? What week is this now?
I can't remember. What about our guests? Can you?
11.
Thank you. 11.
Oh.
Week 11.
Is it 9 or 11? They're always changing it.
It's 11.
Officially 11, but session 9.
Yep. And how many more weeks do we have until the end of the semester?
4.
4, right? Yeah.
I've got 1 more week worth of teaching and then 3 weeks of presentations.
Wow.
Feels infinite, doesn't it?
Definitely. Yes. Well, the reason why we're chatting so casually and friendly is because we have 2 very friendly guests with us today, Dr. Jane Robbins and Miss Chrissy Burns. They're going to share with us a really, really interesting course that they have developed. And I think at these times when we're self-isolating, right? We should be, all of us. It's really, really nice to be able to talk to people and be able to share like more personal stories, like just to hear what other people have to think about certain things. And this is actually the core of their subject. Their subject is called Storytelling for Life, Sharing Personal Narratives. So hi, Jane. Hi, Chrissy.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I know that this subject isn't running this semester, right?
No, we ran it last semester for the first time, and we almost ran the whole thing before everything went. We've got 3 weeks that have never been taught yet.
Wow. How are you missing teaching the subject? I guess that's my question, because I know that you guys really enjoy teaching that subject.
Yes and no. I think for me, it was quite intensive. I had a really heavy workload in addition to teaching that course. So I felt like I needed a bit of break and wanted to kind of have time to look back at the materials and fine tune them a bit. But that being said, it seems like a long time since I've been in the classroom, and it would be wonderful to be back teaching that and hearing the students' stories.
Mm.
We were just talking, Chrissy and I, yesterday. The last time I was in the classroom in November before the Polyu was occupied was teaching this group on the Friday lunchtime. One of the things we did was using stories to promote yourself in an interview, and we had a kind of round robin speed dating thing. And so the last class I was doing was the speed dating interviews from the storytelling. I was like, wow, it seems like a lifetime ago.
When you actually could see students face to face and interact with people. Yeah, so
That's
sorry
right.
for our listeners, because we just jumped right into our conversation. We haven't even really talked about what the subject is, so maybe some of you are just kind of confused right now. Jane, Chrissy, why don't you take us away and maybe just talk about what the subject is, like just to introduce that to our listeners.
Okay, so Polyu students do 4 what we call CAR subjects, and I can never remember what CAR stands for, cluster area requirement. There are a kind of general education, they have to do 4 general education subjects as part of their graduation requirement. And there are 4 different categories of these CAR subjects. Human nature, relations and development, which I guess is kind of social studies. Which is what this one comes under. One is to do with community organisation and globalisation, which I think might be to do with the service learning, I'm not sure. One's to do with history and culture, and one's to do with science and technology. Okay, so this one comes under human nature. And do you want to take it on, Chrissy? Chrissy, it's Chrissy's baby, so she can tell you where it came from.
So I was drawn to teaching one of these CAR subjects. Usually we're teaching our own courses in the Language Center, but these CAR subjects obviously have a broader scope and give you more possibilities for content and things you can do with the students. So the course that we developed is called Storytelling for Life, Sharing Personal Narratives. And it fulfills that first category that Jane mentioned, human nature, relations, and development. So it has that kind of angle, and also focuses on the language aspects of storytelling. So it's all about speaking skills and oral storytelling. And the students through the course, there are 3 assessments. The first one is a live oral storytelling, kind of in the middle of the semester. And once they've reached that hurdle, gone through that hurdle, we say, okay, the stress is over. That was kind of the big thing leading up to, for them, was developing their confidence to share a story with a larger group. And after that, they have a videotaped story that they, for their final assessment, as well as a reflection that talks about their own experiences in the course, what they've learned in the course. We brought in the aspect of experiential learning and taught them about Kolb's experiential learning cycle, and told them that, you'll be telling lots of stories in this class, getting lots of feedback from the teachers and your other classmates, and you can apply that feedback and improve your skills through these 13 weeks of the semester. So that's kind of the course in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you for that. What I want to ask is why storytelling? What motivated you to create this subject? Why is storytelling so important?
It was a perfect subject, and I looked at lots of different potential subjects that filled the desire I had to do something that was very motivating and engaging for the students. Actually, I went to a workshop at a conference in Macau with Jason Lee from Baptist U, and he shared about the courses he does teaching Shakespeare to his students, and they do drama performances. And I even went to a poetry slam down in Central where his students performed. And I thought, wow, this is what I want my students to be doing. I want them to be, loving their learning as much as his seemed to be. So I just had my radar out for ideas for quite some time. And I'm involved with Inscribe, which is the ELC's Journal of Undergraduate Writing. And there's a lot of good creative writing happening at PolyU and in ELC. So the idea, it kind of came to me, and then I researched it and found that other universities around the world were doing a lot of courses on storytelling. It's kind of like a hot topic issue, from Harvard Business School. There's a man named Marshall Gans who has courses on storytelling from the aspect of community engagement and business programs, marketing, promotion. There are a lot of different angles of storytelling. So I thought that we could use storytelling as kind of a skill that our students can learn, and they could learn to apply them in these different contexts, such as the job interviews, as Jane mentioned earlier. That was probably the most rewarding class, I would say, was having them, we taught them this kind of model of, how to sell yourself in, with a short answer to a question and in a persuasive way. And
I think increasingly, things are sold as stories. Things are packaged as stories. One of the things I remember, the students came, he had a part-time job as a demonstrator in a department store. And he came back in one day and said, I've been trying all the things to persuade people. I've been telling stories and kind of engaging people. It's like, okay, so if you can use it as a demonstrator and a part-time job, there are probably lots of places you can use it. Did his sales
go up? Did he tell you anything about that?
I don't know. He didn't tell me that. I wonder if he's on commission.
He's quite charming. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. It was wonderful to hear our students, talk about applying these in, the learning from class in the real world, whether by, observing and finding stories in unexpected places and just noticing how ubiquitous they are in the world and how
storytelling. Oh, one question that I do have when you were sharing about the job interviews, right? Jane mentioned that there was a speed dating type of setup where they had to, could you share a little bit more about that?
We split the class in two. We'd kind of talked about, because they'd done a longer story, and we said, okay, in this we're going to use it, like you can use, because it's all personal, it's you telling your personal story, so you can then use that to answer the interview question, whether it is tell us about a time that you showed leadership, or all those usually interview questions. And we're saying your answer becomes more memorable if you tell it as a story. We've always said right the way through the course, show, don't tell. So take us through the experience, what it was like, rather than just say, oh, well, I did this. So we got them kind of thinking about interview questions beforehand, and then we just split the group in two. And they had, I think it was probably 1 minute, and then we moved on to the next person. So each person took one slip with one question. So the interviewer each time was asking 6 people or whatever the same question and listening to all the answers. And then they swapped over and took one. So the guys moving around, the interviewees, answered all 6 questions. And then the interviewers had a prize for the one from the group that they thought had answered best consistently through all of them. So a lot of them were using the same kind of story, but repackaging it to show different aspects of their skills.
That sounds very challenging. Yeah, what kind of students actually take this course? Like, they must be very motivated, high proficiency. Like, can you describe like the students who take this subject?
Yeah, you're right, Jessica. We were surprised at the level of students that of many of the students that joined our class. We did have a range. We had a handful of maybe the more typical student that we would teach with a lower level of English, and we were impressed that they kind of challenged themselves with this course. And then we had quite a few international students, and students who had lived in North America, who had gone to IB schools, that kind of thing. It was certainly the most diverse course I've ever taught.
They came from all over.
And the students.
Why do you think students were interested in taking this course? Like, what do you think attracted them to registering for this course?
I think it might have been my posters.
That's a great tip.
Good, and they were everywhere.
In fact, if our semester hadn't been interrupted, I wanted to ask them that very question, because it's a very important question you asked, Jessica. We launched a new course and we needed to get students in the door. So I made a poster that I plastered all over campus and sent out.
You could not avoid the poster wherever you went on campus.
Such a great tip for anyone who has a new subject.
That's right. The other thing that didn't occur to me till later was that we were surprised how, at the general level of English, that a lot of them were international students, that English was quite high proficiency. And we were scrambling to kind of bump up the level of some of the materials that we'd kind of worked on. But it kind of, in hindsight, actually, perhaps we shouldn't have been that surprised, because if you have an elective that says ELC in the course code, maybe it would only actually attract people who were already fairly confident in English. Maybe you wouldn't take an elective from the ELC if you thought you were going to get a poor language grade.
The students were wonderful. They really were. I mean, I think it was really the different levels that they had of English didn't seem to be a problem. It really was a learning opportunity for them. We got so much feedback about how they loved hearing the other students' stories. And
one of the things that came up in the reflection essay at the end was a number of people said they've never been in a class where they knew their classmates so well, because the kind of things that they were sharing, they shared more than we were expecting them to. They went further in some of these stories. And they were just comfortable to do that. It was kind of, I guess, a relatively small group, but they certainly kind of came out of themselves. And
Can you give us like a?
Yeah, they kind of gelled.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jane, but I was just wondering, like you were talking about the personal stories that they were sharing. Is there like a wide range of types of story that they're sharing?
Yes. Yeah. You really want to go there? So,
well, it's Friday.
So, one of the things that I remember, one of the nicest moments that I remember was he was actually a Korean student. He was talking, and we had consultations with them between when they kind of drew their script up and as they were going through. And he was talking about being bullied in school when he was younger and taking up judo and martial arts, kind of taking a long time to get going with it, but then kind of increasing his confidence because there was something he could do. And his script looked great, and I was kind of giving him feedback. He needed a bit more kind of the show rather than the tell. And then he said, actually, there's more to the story than that I haven't included. I was diagnosed with depression because of all the bullying. Should I mention that? And I said, well, it's entirely up to you. It's your story. You share as much of it as you feel comfortable in the group that you're telling it to. That's part of storytelling. You're in control of it. And he said, but if I mentioned depression in high school, then I would have got referred to the counsellor straight away, so I didn't dare talk about it. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. It's your responsibility. You. And he went, oh, is that because I'm an adult now? And this student kind of grew up in front of me and suddenly kind of thought, okay, I'm 18, I'm an adult, I can take responsibility for this.
Well, that's quite the impact.
I was like, oh, okay then.
And that is a very interesting story. And you ran this subject at a very interesting time, perhaps one of the most interesting times that you could possibly be running it at.
Sure.
Or during. You ran it during the occupation, the protests, the abbreviated semester.
Yes.
I'm sure there must have been some really interesting stories that came out of that experience. Were any of the students willing to talk about that, or did you get any stories touching on that element?
Well, a couple that come to mind. I don't know if they directly relate to this, but we did have one student who is a local girl, and but she's of mixed ethnicity, and she shared some personal difficulties that she's going through. Certainly the down atmosphere of that semester was affecting all of our students. And another one talked about, she was actually a professional athlete, and she was competing for preparing for the Olympics here in Hong Kong, and just had tremendous pressure and maybe a bit of bullying type situation. And part of her journey was giving up that dream of going to the Olympics and deciding to come to Polyu and resolving to be a coach in the future. She wanted to coach girls and be a better kind of mentor and role model for them.
So one thing that struck me, kind of directly related to it, was it wasn't really from the stories, but it was in the reflection. Can I just read out what one of them wrote? She said, a mainlander, a South Asian Hong Konger, a frontline protester, a tourist, a police officer. I've seen the world from their perspective through storytelling, and I weep for their misery and wish for their turmoil to end. And perhaps it is what our city needs the most today, the capacity to stand in another's shoes and feel with them.
Wow.
And that just blew me away when I read it.
That's like the first.
Not only the sentiment, the fact that they could do it in such good English.
Like I just immediately I went into marking mode, because we're all marking now, and I was like, that's a definite A+. Like I have never.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
I have never ever had such like strong.
I was just reading it. It was like, when we got all the reflections, Chrissy and I were we met up in the computer room they had in the community college for us. while we couldn't get into PolU, and we met up and we were comparing. I said, "Oh, have you read any of them?" And she was like, "Feeling a bit teary now."
Yeah.
Wow, that's something we all want to experience as teachers, right? Like, and I guess my question is just like, can we use any of these elements that make this course so, I would say, safe? Is it like a safe environment for students to share? It's a comfortable environment for them to want to be involved in the learning process, right? But do you think like any other courses, even like the academic English courses or the other courses, is there any element from this course that we can actually adopt like in other courses?
That's a great question. One thing that comes to mind, just off the top of my head, is we had 25 students total, and we set it up as 1 hour lecture, 2 hours tutorial. And there were 2 tutorial groups. So we had typically 12 or 13 students in the tutorial. I mean, frankly, that seems like just like a perfect number for being able to engage with the students. And we each came to the tutorials. We weren't kind of assigned to both of them, but we wanted to be there. So they had 2 teachers and 12 or 13 students. So of course, that's the ideal. We all hope that we can have this luxury, you know, in the future when we're engaging with our students. So I feel like the close contact they had really gave them a sense of belonging and kind of a safe space. I think the approach that Jane and I had was just, we're both fairly friendly and casual people, and you know, we wanted to make the course that way. So we were giving them topics that were, you know, funny or engaging, and so I think that's part of the engagement is just kind of the content. What are they learning? What are they talking about? I think that's part of the mix as well.
And how about, you know, this semester you are not running this subject?
No, that's right.
So if you were to run it this semester in this online format, in this distance format that we're currently experiencing, are there any changes that you would make to it to make it run better? Or how could you capture that, you know, that classroom environment, that safe space? How could you capture that feeling in this current format, do you think?
I think it would be fairly challenging. I mean, obviously things like the speed dating isn't going to work. We did have every week we had in the tutorial, we gave them a storytelling challenge. So they had to tell a story of some point. Some of it we kind of gave out random slips with words on, and they had to tell like a sequential, they had to tell the next part of the story, but include those words. So I think the storytelling challenge would still go ahead. But I wonder if they would get that sense of closeness that they had. They all worked with everyone in the group. We deliberately moved people around, so they weren't always working with the same people. I don't know whether they'd get that sense of closeness with each other.
We would have to adapt, you know, certain activities, because we did activities with body language and voice, you know, using their voice to convey emotion, things like that, which they really seemed to enjoy.
And there was quite a lot of physical stuff, like using gestures and kind of standing up and doing stuff which they'd lose. Although, I mean, some of them did it when they recorded at the end of their semester. They just recorded their presentation, their story on a phone, but they managed to do all the gestures. One girl, which was brilliant, she was doing something about arguing with her mum about the clothes that her mum wanted her to wear and what she wanted to wear, and she just had this whole drama going on of her just all filmed on the phone, but like having one arm in a cardigan and another arm in something else, and the hat coming off, and she must have rehearsed it so many times for it to work.
The students are extremely invested, like even in the assessments. That's very rare. Like it's like they have ownership, but also they're like just like what Jane was saying, for a student to rehearse it numerous times just to get it right. I don't know if I've ever seen that in any assessment.
We did give them a choice of assessments for that, the second one. They could either do a digital story or they could record themselves doing a live storytelling, and we left it up to them to decide. And we've had about half and half.
Yeah, that choice I think was really a great decision, especially when the the protests shut down our university and students were making their videos from home in many cases. And it allowed them to, shine with their own talents. We have some, amazing videographers there and storytellers, and the end result far exceeded anything I expected. So that,
and I think it added a safety net. If we'd said you have to do a digital story, there's a lot that when we've done those in other subjects, because it's not the only subject that has digital stories, students are worried about it. It's kind of something they're not familiar with. But there was that kind of safety net. Well, we'll try it, give it a go. And if it's not working or it doesn't come out like you want it to, you can still go ahead and just record yourself telling the story in person, just to the video. And so there was that kind of safety net that we'll try it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. So there were a number who were trying it, and then when everyone disappeared off, said, no, I can't do that now.
While we're on the subject of assessments, how do you actually judge the quality of the stories? How do you assess that? I imagine there are a lot of things that go into that.
We didn't come up with the rubrics. We let the students do that.
Wow. Oh.
Interesting. Please explain.
So at the Hong Kong CPD Hub conference last year, there was a workshop with someone who was an assessment, and I can't remember her name, but I went to the workshop and she was talking about negotiated rubrics. And I was with Alan Ermston, those of you who don't know him, he's like assessment guru. And he said, I've always wanted to do that, but I've never had the chance. So I thought this was the perfect opportunity, and I managed to persuade Chrissy to go along with my kind of idea.
I believe it was Maggie's Sokolix workshop that you referred to, Jane.
So what we did was, before the first storytelling, the live storytelling, we went in and said, okay, you know what we've talked about. What do you think we should be looking for?
So did you use these rubrics during, let's say, you said that they had a lot of time to practice, right? Did you ask the students to use these rubrics, giving feedback to each other?
Not particularly with the rubrics. They knew them because they'd come up with them, but they tended to focus on more specific things. So as they were doing them, and say, okay, today we want you to look at this. So very often they'd be in groups of 3. One would be telling a story, and the 2 others would have one thing each that they were giving feedback on, and then they kind of rotate around.
It's very interesting. Do you think that would work in other subjects?
Well, I think I think Alan's reasoning was that you couldn't use it if you had a whole group of students as teachers that you're trying to moderate. We were fortunate in that it was only us teaching it, and we could kind of say, well, how do you think this one works? And kind of, you couldn't do it in a big subject.
The smaller subjects definitely could give that a try.
But definitely meant the students kind of owned it more. They felt, you're saying they're engaged in the assessments. They
yes,
felt
absolutely.
they owned the assessments more.
It feels like they kind of have a chance to exercise their own autonomy of what's important, what they should learn in this subject. So I think that's a fascinating adaptation that you've included to get them to design their own rubrics. I mean, I think that's a really a fascinating aspect of this subject. Did you end up having a wide range of grades then when that was over, or was it about normal? Was it about what you expected?
No, they were really high. We kept kind of giving out really high grades and thinking, oh no, SARP are going to hate us.
But we felt confident that if we showed these stories to anyone, they would say, wow, this is absolutely amazing. I'm trying to remember, for the lower students, I think, their effort boosted up their grade, perhaps, from the C territory up into a B territory, if my memory is correct. So it was nice to see that even starting with a low level of English, that their work, they could improve their grade by showing that they had, mastered the art of storytelling.
Do you think, storytelling, of course, this is always a fascinating subject. And I'm just looking forward, in this current situation we're in, social distancing, sheltering in place. Do you think storytelling has more relevance now than it ever had in the past?
I kind of feel like you're onto something, Eric. I was just telling my students the other day, in the course I'm teaching now, they write feature articles, which are supposed to be entertaining and engaging. So I've been talking about being engaging and all semester long. And it seems like you hear about engagement now. It's like an important aspect of our society on many levels. So, and it seems like a lot of, with the, traditional TV media being shut down, like in America, a lot of these talk show hosts are just doing things from home, turning on the microphone and telling stories, So I kind of feel like you're onto something, Eric. We're isolated here in our, small flats and wanting that kind of human contact. And I can see how the ability to spin a good yarn, is really quite powerful.
And maybe from the teacher's perspective as well. There's always a lot of talk about the best way. What's the best way for us teachers to deliver online content and online instruction?
Mm-hmm.
And do you think the storytelling could actually be a teaching tool for us in this format, similar to how you mentioned the American talk show hosts are telling stories from their flats? Could this be a way that we make our own online lessons more engaging?
I just kind of fear that I'll end up rambling. It'll just be the Jane show. Well, actually, one of the things when we, in the course, when we split after the first live storytelling, and we then moved into, okay, you now know the basic concepts of putting a story together. How are we going to apply this? So in job interviews, in selling something, and all the other things, kind of had that kind of break, and it's like, now we're going to do this, and they go, so we're going to look at what jobs when could you use this in the workplace? And one guy just looks perfectly straight faced. He goes, you could become an English teacher. So clearly that's what we do anyway.
Absolutely. I've been using it as a pedagogical tool for a while. I love to tell the stories about the students I've had in the past who did something bad. They waited till the last minute and their computer blew up and they didn't submit the assessment on time and their grade got knocked down. You can just keep, compiling these real life anecdotes, and they really can work quite well in the classroom, I find.
Yeah, this reminds me of one of our colleagues, Caitlin. She was sharing during an online session where we got together and talked about what worked in our classrooms, online classrooms. And she was saying how she did a quick survey, and her students actually said that what they enjoyed most about the lesson is listening to the teacher talk. So that was very surprising for her. So it outranked any of the interactive tools that she was using. And so she just reminded us that, students do like listening to us talk. Now, of course, given that we're actually using storytelling skills. But then, but that's something students enjoy. And I think during this time, they're at home stuck with their family, or they're not able to really talk to their friends or something, and they're just really used to being on their phones texting and not really hearing people's voices, talking to people. So I do think that's something we should bear in mind. In the final 4 weeks of online teaching, let's all turn on. Yeah,
that's true. Well, actually, that's something. How when you're in class, particularly not just me talking, but you kind of get the students to talk, and they're all looking down, and you kind of think, do they actually ever listen when one of the other students is talking? One of the things I really liked about online teaching, right at the beginning, one of my students, I got them all kind of coming on camera briefly to give an introduction, and one girl came in and said, "Hello, I'm Brittany. I'm in Wuhan. I haven't left my house in 26 days. And all the emojis that went up on the screen, and you kind of think, yeah, they are listening. They are engaged, even when they look like they're not.
Yes. And even when you just say something as simple as, can you hear me? And then you see loads of people saying, yes, 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 you know, it just makes you feel like, oh, okay. So I guess that's a really good tip for us, especially during the final weeks of teaching. I think everybody's really tired, no matter if it's the teachers or students, but if we just remember, like, every single time we talk to them, we can package it as, here's another week of storytelling for you or something. I like storytelling about this subject or about this experience. I think that would really help us get through the final weeks.
Yeah, fascinating. I think a lot of the research always shows that, you know, people are naturally attracted to stories. Whenever they hear a story coming, they kind of turn on their ears, they pay attention, they listen, especially a story from one of their peers. So, of course, the lesson we can take from this is get your students to tell stories. You can tell stories as well. The more stories we tell, the more they'll pay attention, and hopefully the more they'll take away from this. It's very, storytelling is a very, fascinating subject. So Jane and Chrissy, before we go, are there any parting words or parting stories that you would like to tell all the teachers who are out there listening in the lift, something that might give them hope or inspire them?
And I had a thought. I don't know if you want to talk about this, but it follows up on what Jessica was saying a bit, is, using storytelling in the classroom. In the past, when I was teaching an academic writing course, ELC 1014, it was at the time, we had to teach students how to do research. And it was quite a difficult experience for them. So I remember a wonderful assignment I had was, okay, you're all going to tell the story of what happened. Your homework was to, research X topic using the PolyU library search and Google Scholar. Tell us the story of what happened. And I can remember the other classmates being deeply engaged. If I'm standing up there at the front of the room showing them how to do it, they're not really paying much attention. But when the students are telling their, trials and tribulations, and it was interesting how many of them framed it in kind of the classic storytelling arc, like the hero's journey. They went off on this adventure and they met with all these ogres and demons, and finally they had the breakthrough and they found the articles that they needed. So I think that's something to keep in mind is how we might be able to use storytelling in our classes, no matter what the topic is.
The only other thing that I don't know whether to bring it in, but something we were talking about going forward, something that happened last year, I don't know if the people are aware, there is an organization called Hong Kong Stories. And Chrissy and I went to, and I think Pat, you were there, went to one of their workshops in preparation for when we were putting this course together. And they have monthly get-togethers where people stand up and tell a story for 3 minutes. And they sent an advert round. There was a competition last autumn for students. And I got in touch with them and said, is this uni students or high school students? And
Hopefully
it was for high school students. But they did say that if there are enough uni students who do storytelling, they would think about putting a storytelling competition on for them. So if there are students in other universities that are doing storytelling of some kind, whether it's extracurricular or part of a course, maybe we can kind of put something together with Hong Kong Stories.
Okay, Hong Kong Stories. Well, that also sounds like a great way to get students involved in podcasting. That could be, a lot of good stories come out of podcasting, such as the ones that Jane and Chrissy told to all of our listeners here today. So we want to thank you, both of you, for being here with us today and sharing some of your stories about storytelling. I think all of our listeners have, we've kind of got a new insight to the value of this subject, and hopefully it can be made of good use to many of the teachers out there in this online format or whenever. So thank you once again, Dr. Jane Robbins and Ms. Chrissy Burns from the Hong Kong PolyU ELC. We enjoyed having you here in the lift with us today. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Hi, thank you for coming. And I really look forward to seeing you guys at PolyU, at the ELC.
Thank you.
And and hearing stories face to face.
Just rambling. It's just rambling.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode and that the stories and perspectives our guests shared today will inform and inspire your teaching. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll tell a friend and subscribe to our podcast so you won't miss our future episodes. Please do check out our website at teacherslift.com and like us on Facebook, Instagram, or whatever social media channels you use. You can get all the links at teacherslift.com. Teachers Lift is a collaborative product from teachers at the English Language Center at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, the Center for Applied English Studies at the University of Hong Kong, and the Center for Language Education at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. This episode was recorded on April 17th, 2020.